Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm really excited because today I'm going to be doing my first wrap up ever, which is for the month of May. Without further ado, let's get started with the book that I rated the lowest star this month, which was Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I gave this book 1 star. It's basically about this girl named Kirsten. You can see how much I was attached to the character. Basically, it's about a pandemic that wipes out the majority of Earth's population, and it goes back and forth in time between before the pandemic and after the pandemic, and it follows this girl named Kristen Raymond, who is an actress, and after the pandemic, she's a part of this like symphony that goes around to the remaining settlements and performs Shakespeare. But instead of going into what I thought about this book, I was like, why not go to Goodreads and see if there's anyone out there that agrees with me about this book. Let's see if I'm the only person in this world who thinks that this book is not worth the hype. So basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be reading some of the quotes from Goodreads, and then I'm gonna compare it to what I've said previously in one of my reading blogs and see if they actually match up. There has been a ton of hype surrounding Station 11 and nothing but rave reviews. This book has so much hype around it and so many people love it. Someone please explain it to me because I just don't get it. And whenever there's a book that's so hyped, I'm always like, am I missing something? About halfway through, I considered quitting it. I have less than 100 pages left. I really want to get it done. After finishing it, I wish I had. It never improved. Like the last 30 pages, I just tried to read so fast because I was like, I want to get this over with. Spend your money on another book, or at least get this one from the library. I'm mad that I spent money on this because what a waste of money. Boring beyond belief with a cast of unlikable characters. Care about any of the characters. I wish I had embarked on the same journey as those readers, but it was like slow torture instead. I don't really care about their journey or the story. The only thing that kept me going was the hope that I would be rewarded with an ending that tied all of the weirdness together in an interesting way. That's not what happened though. I care how it ended. I don't think the book wrapped up well. This is what we're lifting up as the best book of the year and an example of excellent writing. Just literally look at that. It has a medal on it and everything, and I feel like I must have missed something. So the next book I want to talk about is Lady Chatelain's Lover by D.H. Lawrence. I actually really like this book, which is funny because this book is the lowest rated book that I've read this month on Goodreads. It has a 3.5 stars. It's a very controversial book. It was banned for 30 years, but of course, that's the book that I liked the most. I actually ended up giving this book 5 stars because it was unlike anything that I've ever read, and I just really enjoyed my reading experience with it. And anyone that loves classics and if you like romance, I would definitely pick this book up. It's a pretty easy read. It was written in the 20s, so it's not like it's super old where the language is really complicated. This book is about this woman named Connie, who is Lady Chatelain. Her husband comes home from World War I and he is crippled, so he's paralyzed from the waist down. She has found herself in a situation where her and her husband cannot be physically intimate anymore, and they're also not emotionally intimate with each other. So she goes through these bouts of, depression, and she is trying to understand the meaning of life and why she's here. And she ends up meeting the gamekeeper for the estate that she lives on, and he ends up becoming Lady Chatelain's lover. And even though this book is known for all of the smut scenes, as I've said in my reading blog, I think this book is a lot deeper than just, the risque parts. It talks a lot about class. It talks a lot about just existing in this world. I also think this is a more accurate portrayal of romance and love, more so than books that I read that are contemporary. So if you're looking for a great classic read, do not let the bad reviews get in the way. Pick this book up and see what your opinion is. I was really afraid to read it, but I ended up loving it, and I am so glad that I ended up reading it this month. The next book I want to talk about is Little Fires Everywhere by Celestia. I didn't love this book as most people do. I know this book gets a lot of hype. I was just looking up what the plot is because I honestly don't even know what to say this book is about. If I could sum it up, I would say that this book is about this kind of cookie cutter suburb in Ohio, and there's this family called the Richardsons. So there's the mom and the dad, and they have 4 kids, and they live a fairly traditional life, or at least the mom has. And then this woman named Mia comes in and rents a house from the Richardsons, and she has a daughter, Pearl, and they kind of, don't really fit the status quo of the suburb. And you learn a lot about the character's past, and I'm making this book sound really boring. It actually was like semi-entertaining. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars because it's a book that you can like read and it's like somewhat entertaining if you're like on the beach, like pick up this book. But I just like wasn't super connected with any of the characters, and although I think that this book addresses really important topics, especially in today's culture, I just thought that the story just seemed a little bit disjointed to me, and I never really understood the point of it. And I don't know, I just wasn't in love with the writing style of it, and so that's why I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I wanted to discuss with you is The Kiss Quotient, and I actually listened to this book via audio. And this book I also gave a 3 out of 5 stars. It's basically about this girl named Stella who has Asperger's, and she kind of struggles in the love department. So she ends up hiring an escort who she's hoping will teach her how to be in a relationship and like what that's like. So it's kind of like one of those feel-good books you listen to and it's like, heartwarming. I mean, in my opinion, I didn't get like a lot out of it. Part of like when you really think about the plot, you're like, okay, this girl has to hire an escort, or I don't know. It was just like a little weird for me, which is why I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. I know it's also like a very popular contemporary romance, but it was just, in my opinion, okay. So the next book that I want to discuss is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. I know you're probably like, I don't recognize the cover, and I was really shocked when I received this cover in the mail. I ordered it used, and I was upset that I got the movie tie-in edition. But anyway, I was gonna try to figure out how to say what this book was about, but the back of the book actually gives a very concise view of what this book is. So it says, Harriet Wenger, a descendant of one of Sweden's wealthiest families, disappears over 40 years ago. All these years later, her aged uncle continues to seek the truth. He hires Michael Blomquist, a crusading journalist recently trapped by a libel conviction, to investigate. He is aided by the pierced and tattooed punk prodigy Elizabeth Salander. Together they tap into a vein of unfathomable inequity and astonishing corruption. I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars. It's thick, but I actually got through it pretty fast. It's a pretty interesting read, and it's more like a mystery thriller, which if you like that, definitely pick up this book. I've heard of this book for many years. I never decided to pick it up. It's honestly the perfect book to read in quarantine because it's big and it's entertaining and fun. I have the second book, but I haven't yet picked it up yet. I kind of wanted to give myself a breather before I, went ahead and picked up the second book. But I liked this book. I thought the plot was interesting. I don't usually read mysteries, so it was a little bit different than what I'm used to. I guess one of my main issues, which I feel like is every book, is I feel like the main character, Mikkel, I just didn't feel like he had a personality at all, and he was really just a way to push the plot forward. And I almost wish he had more distinguishing characteristics so that you really got to know him, because everyone thinks that the main character is the girl with the dragon tattoo, but I almost feel like she was not as big of a deal as he was, and I just wish they made him a little bit more compelling. But maybe later on in the trilogy, I will get to know him a little bit better. This can be read as a standalone, so if you're like too afraid to start like a massive trilogy, then you can just read this book and put it down and you can be done. But then I have heard that once you get into the second and third book, you obviously realize like where the story is going and why it becomes a trilogy. But I thought this book wrapped up pretty cleanly where you can just read it on its own. So the next book I want to talk about is Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, if I'm saying that correctly. This book I gave a 4 out of 5 stars to. This book is so freaking heavy. But it's basically about, as Amazon said, it's about humanity's creation and evolution. It explores the ways in which biology and history have defined us and enhanced our understanding of what it means to be human. But overall, I will say that this book did change my perspective of the world. It changed my perspective of being human and some of the beliefs that were taught. I am really interested in human evolution, and the very beginning of this book focused on, you know, us being like cavemen and Neanderthals, which is why I picked up the book. But I quickly realized that the book gets into more of human history than what I thought, and it really goes from evolution all the way up to today, and I was not expecting that. And I was really hoping to learn more about, you know, way back, and I kind of was getting a little bit more disengaged once I got into like agriculture and science, which is not really what I was interested in. But overall, I can say that this book has changed my perspective. I have even caught myself out in the world thinking about things that I've learned in this book, and I guess to me that's why I like to read. So 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I want to talk about is This Love Story Will Self-Destruct by Cohen. I absolutely love this book so much. This was a reread for me, so I read this a couple of years ago, and I was kind of in the mood for like a feel-good contemporary romance, and this is one of my favorites, so I decided to reread it. And I ended up loving it just as much as I did, if not more, than the first time I read it. I actually lied. This is probably the lowest rated book that I've read on Goodreads. I was so shocked when I looked up this book and it has a 3.38 Goodreads average, because I love it so much. It's like a boy meets girl kind of story where they meet in college at Columbia and kind of run in the same social circles. And then they serendipitously like run into each other throughout their early 20s, and then obviously start their own relationship later on. And on the back it says, "This is a classic tale of boy meets girl, but girl goes home with someone else." I love this book. That was a really poor description. I'm like not giving this book enough a better description, but I just love this book so much because I feel like it portrays love in such an interesting way, and also just gives such a like good description of what it's like to actually live and survive in New York City. I mean, I think a lot of people might not have liked this book if they didn't live in New York City, because it has like a lot of street names and restaurants that I feel like I connect with because I live here, but I don't know, maybe those little pieces would, you know, go over someone else's head. But I just love the way that the author describes the characters in this book. I think she really does a good job of getting inside their head and just giving us a glimpse of how they think and what their thought processes are like. And I just think that their relationship is a very realistic portrayal of what it's like to date in today's society. And I just love this book so much. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars again. This just proves that if you go on Goodreads to see what other people think about a book, that does not necessarily mean that you're gonna like the book. And that's why it's really important to give books a chance. If the premise of the story sounds interesting and a lot of other people might not like it, pick it up and see if it's the book for you. But definitely if you're looking for contemporary romance and you haven't checked this one out, give this one a shot. I've been waiting for this author to come out with another book ever since I picked this book up, and I was so excited the other day. I looked and she is coming out with a new book this July called Ride or Die, and I'm definitely going to be checking it out, and I cannot wait to see what other stories she comes up with. Next book I want to talk about is Untamed by Glennon Doyle. I listened to this via audiobook. My experience with this book kind of varied. I was really liking it at the beginning, and then I wasn't liking it as much, and then I wasn't liking it at all, and then I liked it like towards the end. It's basically like a memoir of this woman, and she talks about her life experience in becoming untamed, meaning she has the argument that, you know, society and culture tames us to be a certain way, and our job is to untame ourselves and be who we're meant to be in this life. So it's definitely very inspiring, and she goes through a lot of like her own life and her journey, which obviously I think is really interesting. And my rating is obviously not on her story and her life experience. It was just about my personal enjoyment with the book. And for me, there was parts of the book that I connected with and parts that I didn't. And because it's a self-help book, I decided to give it a 3 out of 5 stars because it's, for me, like more on the average side, but I still really enjoyed it. I think one of like the tidbits of information that will stick with me, which is really random, but it was about like not Googling your like issues or questions, because I feel like a lot of times it's easy to, you know, go outside of yourself for advice when you really know like the answers within you and what you actually want to do. And I feel like when you go on the internet and you look for advice or people that have been through something similar, you're kind of just getting like a crowd of different voices in your head, and you're not able to make your own decision for what works best for you in your life. So that was like the one piece that will stay with me for a while. But overall, yeah, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It's definitely like a solid self-help book. I feel like, you know, it probably would relate more to someone that's a little bit older and has lived more life. I've never been married, I've never had kids before, and I just feel like maybe I would have a different perspective if I had gone through some of those things. But anyway, those are the books that I read in May. Please comment down below any of your favorite books that you read this month, because I really need suggestions, as you can tell. I want to make June a better reading month for me. And I really appreciate you sticking around for the end of this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you again in my next video. Goodbye.